your story to be about tonight?
What?
What do you want your story to be about tonight?
About a cupcake.
Cupcake.
That was running away from someone that wanted to eat him.
Oh. Can we choose something else? I can't think of anything interesting related to a cupcake that's running away.
And then we're gonna pick the same thing, but instead he had superpowers.
Okay. This is the story of Fred. Fred was your typical teenager. He was worried about the things typical teenagers are worried about. Girls, and sometimes going out with friends and games, and of course, learning because it's very important to learn. But Fred wanted a little bit more out of life. He wanted to make some money. And so he went and got a very basic job, but a job nonetheless, something that could give him a little bit more money so he could save up to do some more fun things. And guess what his job was?
What?
He was a promotional character for a new bakery that had just opened. And to do this, they dressed him up like a cupcake. And his work was to stand in front of the bakery and give samples of cupcakes dressed up like a cupcake, which for Fred worked out great because he did not want his friends to see him dressed as a cupcake or the fun would never end on his behest. So the fact that he was dressed up like a cupcake meant that nobody could see his face. And so he was, by all means, anonymous. It was a fun job, but there was only one small problem. It was Fido. Fido was a very, very inquisitive dog. It was a little dog, but he was yuppie and he really wanted to eat the cupcake. I don't know why. Maybe he thought it was a giant cupcake. Maybe he thought that Fred inside of the cupcake was very delicious. Nobody knows why, but every time Fido's owner would go out for a walk and he would walk across the street from Fred, he would yell and bark and pull on the leash because he knew that his mission one day would be fulfilled to try to eat the giant cupcake. And so Fred armed himself with magical powers. Well, magical if you're a dog, because all Fred had was an ultrasonic whistle that was so loud, but it's a whistle, it's a frequency of sound that humans cannot hear. So this device made a noise that was so loud that it really scared dogs away, but it didn't bother humans. And Fred got this because he thought, what if one day Fido decides to take a bite off of me and I don't want to find out? Well, one day finally arrived. This day, for some reason, Fido's owner did not walk in front across the street from Fred, but instead was walking on the same street. Fido, the little dog, and Fred, the giant cupcake, locked eyes. It would be a fierce battle to the death. Fido thought that finally he would get a taste of the biggest cupcake that ever existed. Fred, on the other hand, knew better than that. He had his superpowers, the secret weapon that Fido could not see, could not smell, could not taste, but he could hear, and it would be his defeat. Fido took a few steps forward, his tail straight up. Fred grabbed hold of his device that made ultrasounds and aimed at Fido in between the samples of cupcakes. Fido took a few more steps. Fred looked at Fido straight in the eyes. It was a fierce, fierce competition to see who would flinch first. And then suddenly it happened. Fido lunged and pulled on the leash and started yapping. And Fred was like, "Ha, I'll show you." And he pushed the button and nothing happened. Disaster! Fred had forgotten to check the batteries. What if the batteries were dead? What if, oh no, this was going to be the doom, the end of his days as a giant cupcake. Fred started to fumble with the device and seemed to notice that there was an on-off switch that was turned to off. He may have neglected to turn it on before pushing the button, but Fido was getting very dangerously close. He was about to take a bite of the giant cupcake when suddenly Fred took a sample of a little cupcake of the samples that he was giving out to customers and threw it in Fido's mouth. And Fido went, and that distracted him enough that Fred was able to turn off the device and push the button, and wham! Fido was overwhelmed with such tremendous noise and it was unbearable. He started running away and thinking, this giant cupcake has magical powers. How could that be? But something else was discovered that day. That if he barked close enough, he got a treat, a little sample of cupcake. And so he decided to try this again the next time. But this time he waited and he noticed that Fred, this happened several days later, Fred was turning away from him. So he was not seeing Fido approach him. And he was handling cupcake samples to some people, but Fido was walking from behind him. And when he was right next to Fred, Fred got so scared that he threw the whole platter with cupcake samples, and cupcake samples started raining from the sky, and Fido was so happy, munching on them while his owner was pulling on the leash. Oh, what a glorious day. It was the best day ever. He had so many cupcakes, and all because he was the loudest, fiercest barking dog ever. He was proud of himself. Unfortunately, Fred did not like this and decided that he had enough. He left that job and went to find a better job somewhere else, making sandwiches or something, which was devastating for Fido, because ever since that day, whenever he walked through that part of town, he would always bark at the sky and bark at the business that sold cupcakes, hoping that the giant magical cupcake would appear again and rain bits of cupcakes from the sky with his magic. But alas, that never happened, and Fido lived the rest of his life wondering whatever happened to the magic giant cupcake that had the power to scream in silence, but also had the power to deliver a rain of magical cupcakes coming from the sky. The end. Thank you, Pequeñín. Good night.